I never thought that accidentally overhearing a phone call could change the way I see my family forever. Just a few short words, but they turned everything I believed about my brother upside down. Is someone telling the truth, or is this just a misunderstanding? I don't know, but I do know that I need to find the answer. Growing up, my older brother, Mark, was my hero. He was 6 years older than me, and from as far back as I could remember, he had always been the one I looked up to. He was smart, responsible, and had this quiet strength about him that made me feel safe. Our family wasn't rich, but we had a good life. Our parents worked hard, and Mark seemed to have inherited their strong work ethic. As a kid, whenever I got into trouble, Mark was the one who bailed me out. When I was bullied in elementary school, he walked me home every day until I felt safe again. When I struggled with math in middle school, he patiently helped me with my homework, even though he had his own schoolwork to worry about. He wasn't the type to say, "I love you," or show affection openly, but his actions spoke louder than words. He was the kind of brother you could always count on. Our parents were incredibly proud of him. He excelled in school, got into a great college, and landed a solid job right after graduation. To me, he was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Sure, he was a little distant at times, but I chalked it up to him being older and busy with his own life. There was one thing that had occasionally crossed my mind, though I never dwelled on it much. Mark didn't look much like our parents. While I had Mom's hazel eyes and Dad's sharp nose, Mark's features were different. His skin was slightly darker, his eyes deeper set. But genetics can be weird, and it wasn't something I thought about often. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a regular Wednesday afternoon. My evening class had been canceled, so I came home earlier than usual. As I stepped inside, I heard Mark talking on the phone in the living room. That wasn't unusual. He often took calls for work. But this time, something was different. His voice was tense, almost urgent, like he was trying to control his emotions. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but as I walked past the hallway, I heard a sentence that made my stomach drop. He still doesn't know. I can't tell him. He'd never forgive me. I froze in place. Was he talking about me? What didn't I know? And why did it sound like a secret that could ruin everything? My heart pounded as a dozen thoughts flooded my mind. I felt like I had just walked into a scene from a movie, except this wasn't fiction. This was my life, and something about my brother, my own family, had been kept from me. I had two choices: walk away and pretend I hadn't heard anything, or find out the truth, no matter what it was. I had no idea that this one decision would change my life forever. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind racing. Mark's words echoed in my head. He still doesn't know. I can't tell him. He'd never forgive me. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but eventually, I heard Mark's footsteps coming toward the hallway. My heart pounded in my chest. If he saw me, would he know I had heard him? Would he tell me the truth, or would he lie? Before he could notice me, I quickly turned and walked into the kitchen, pretending like I had just gotten home. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet, filling it with water as casually as possible, even though my hands were shaking. Mark walked in a moment later. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, almost too normal. "You're home early." I nodded, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, class got canceled." He didn't seem suspicious, but now, I was hyper-aware of everything. The slight tension in his voice, the way he avoided making direct eye contact for too long. Maybe I was imagining it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. For the rest of the evening, I tried to act natural, but my mind was spinning. What didn't I know? What secret was Mark keeping from me? That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Every possible scenario ran through my mind. Was he in some kind of trouble? Did he do something illegal? Or was this about our family? A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I needed answers, digging for the truth. The next morning, Mark left early for work, and I decided to do something I had never done before. I snooped. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I couldn't ignore what I had heard. If Mark wasn't going to tell me the truth, I had to find it myself. I started with his room. Mark had always been private, but I knew he kept important documents in his desk drawer. I hesitated before opening it, feeling guilty, but my curiosity won. Inside were the usual things: bills, paperwork, an old college ID. But then, at the bottom of the drawer, I found a small, locked box. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Why would he have a locked box? What was inside? I knew I couldn't open it without a key, but now I was more determined than ever. If Mark was hiding something, it had to be in there. I searched his room for a key but found nothing. Frustrated, I put everything back the way it was and left his room before he could come home and catch me. I needed another way to find out the truth. That's when I remembered his phone. I knew Mark had been on a call when I overheard him. If I could see his call history, maybe I could figure out who he had been talking to. I waited until later that night when Mark was in the shower. His phone was charging in the living room, and I knew I only had a few minutes. I grabbed it, my heart racing, and swiped up. Locked, of course. But then, I remembered something. Mark had set his password years ago, and he never changed it. Holding my breath, I typed in his old password. The phone unlocked. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I went straight to his call history. My eyes scanned the numbers until I found the most recent call. It wasn't saved under a name, just a random number. I quickly grabbed my own phone and copied it down before locking his phone and putting it back exactly where I found it. As soon as I got back to my room, I stared at the number, debating my next move. Should I call it? Should I wait and confront Mark instead? A part of me told me to stop. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Taking a deep breath, I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, someone picked up. A woman's voice. Hello? I froze. I hadn't thought this far ahead. What was I supposed to say? Hi, I stammered. Who is this? There was a long pause on the other end. Then, she spoke again. Who is this? Her voice was tense, almost guarded. My heart pounded. Whoever this was, she wasn't expecting my call. I took a deep breath. I'm looking for Mark, I said carefully. I think you just spoke with him? Another pause. Then, a quiet inhale, like she was bracing herself for something. Who are you? She asked again. I hesitated. I'm his brother. Silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Oh my God. You don't know, do you? A chill ran down my spine. Know what? I asked. Another long pause. Then, she said something that made my blood run cold. I think it's time you found out the truth. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. The woman hesitated. Then, she sighed. I don't know if I should be the one to tell you this. Panic bubbled inside me. Please, I said. I need to know. Another pause. Then, in a voice filled with regret, she said, Mark isn't who you think he is. A cold chill ran down my spine. What the hell does that mean? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The woman took a deep breath. Meet me in person. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Cafe on 5th and Main. Before I could say another word, she hung up. I stared at my phone, my mind spinning. What had I just walked into? Confronting Mark. That night, I barely slept. Every possible scenario ran through my mind. Was Mark in trouble? Had he done something terrible? Or was this about something even bigger? Something about our family? By morning, I knew I couldn't wait until the meeting to get answers. I needed to confront Mark. I found him in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was a normal day. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. Mark, I said, my voice tense. We need to talk. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. About what? I hesitated. How was I supposed to bring this up? I heard your phone call the other night, I admitted. And I called the number. His expression darkened instantly. His fingers tightened around his coffee mug. You did what? I needed to know what's going on, I said, my frustration spilling out. She told me to meet her today. She said, You're not who I think you are. For a moment, I saw something flash in his eyes. Fear. Then, just as quickly, he masked it. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. Mark, just tell me the truth, I pleaded. Please. He exhaled slowly, setting his mug down. There are things you don't understand, he said. Things that, he stopped himself, shaking his head. I can't tell you. I clenched my jaw. Then I'll find out myself. Mark didn't stop me as I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. Maybe he knew it was too late. Maybe he knew the truth was already waiting for me. The cafe on 5th and Main was smaller than I expected. A quiet little spot with large windows and mismatched chairs. It was the kind of place where people met for casual coffee dates, not for life-altering revelations. I stepped inside, my stomach a tight knot of nerves. She was already there, sitting by the window. I recognized her instantly, the woman from the phone call. Mid-40s, short brown hair, tired eyes. She looked like she had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. As I approached, she glanced up, her expression unreadable. "You came," she said softly. I slid into the seat across from her. "I need answers." She sighed, stirring her coffee absently. "I figured you would." I leaned forward. "Who are you? And what do you know about Mark?" She hesitated, then set her spoon down. "My name is Linda." She glanced out the window, as if debating whether to continue. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I'm Mark's mother." The words didn't register at first. I blinked. "What?" She met my eyes, her gaze filled with something I couldn't quite name. "I'm his biological mother," she clarified. "I gave birth to him." I shook my head, my mind struggling to keep up. "That's impossible. My parents." She cut me off gently. "Your parents adopted him." The world tilted beneath me. "That can't be right," I said, barely hearing my own voice. "Mark is my brother. We grew up together. My parents never said anything about adoption." Linda's expression softened. "I'm sure they didn't. They wanted to protect him. And you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you reaching out after all these years?" Linda hesitated, then pulled something from her purse, a faded photograph. She slid it across the table. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a picture of a younger Mark, maybe 4 or 5 years old. He was standing next to Linda, grinning, holding a small toy truck. I had never seen this picture before. Tears burned in my eyes. "Why did you give him up?" She swallowed hard. "I was young, alone. I couldn't give him the life he deserved. Your parents, they could." I sat back, trying to process everything. My whole life, I thought Mark and I were the same. 2 kids raised under the same roof, sharing the same blood. But now, that foundation felt cracked. "Does he know?" I asked. Linda nodded slowly. "He found out a few years ago." My stomach twisted. "And he never told me?" She sighed. "He was scared. He didn't want to lose the only family he's ever known." I closed my eyes, a wave of emotions crashing over me. Shock, sadness, anger. I had spent my whole life believing Mark and I shared everything. Now, I realized he had been carrying this secret alone. When I opened my eyes, Linda was watching me closely. "I don't want to take him away from you," she said softly. "I just wanted to know if he was okay." I studied her face, the quiet pain, the longing. And despite everything, I understood. Mark wasn't just my brother. He was someone else's son too. For the first time, I saw the weight he had been carrying. And I knew I had to talk to him. I pushed my chair back. "Where are you going?" Linda asked. I took a shaky breath. To find my brother. I drove back home in silence, my mind racing. The weight of everything Linda had told me pressed down on my chest. Mark wasn't just my brother. He was someone else's son. Someone who had spent years wondering about him, missing him, hoping he was okay. And he had known all along. When I pulled into the driveway, Mark's car was still there. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine and stepped out. Inside, I found him sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. He looked up when I walked in, and the second our eyes met, I knew he already knew where I had been. "You met her," he said quietly. I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mark exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands together. "Because it didn't change anything. You're my family. Mom and Dad are my family. I didn't want it to be different." I sat down across from him. "But it is different, Mark. You've known for years, and you never said a word." His jaw tightened. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, by the way, I found out I was adopted." What would that have changed? I searched for the right words, but nothing felt right. "I don't know," I admitted. I thought we told each other everything." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "I was scared, okay? I didn't want you to look at me differently. I didn't want Mom and Dad to think I wasn't grateful. And I definitely didn't want to open up old wounds." I shook my head, but keeping it a secret just made it worse. He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I'm realizing that now." Silence hung between us. Then, hesitantly, I said, "She doesn't want to take you away. She just wanted to know if you were okay." Mark swallowed hard, looking down. "I know." I watched him carefully. "Do you want to see her?" His shoulders tensed. "I don't know." I nodded, giving him space. Then, after a long pause, he finally said, "I don't think I'm ready." And for the first time that day, I understood. This wasn't just a revelation for me, it was something he had been wrestling with for years. I reached out, squeezing his shoulder. "Whenever you are, I'll be there." Mark looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he gave a small nod, and in that moment, I knew we would figure this out together. The days that followed felt strange, like I was living in a different reality. Every time I looked at Mark, I saw my brother, the same person I had grown up with, shared secrets with, fought with over the dumbest things. But now, I also saw something else. A man who had carried a secret for years, afraid of what it might do to the family he loved. I gave him space, but I knew he was struggling. Late at night, I'd hear him pacing in his room. Sometimes, I'd catch him staring at his phone, lost in thought. I didn't push him. I figured when he was ready, he'd say something. Then, one evening, he finally did. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was one of those rare quiet moments where neither of us had to say anything. But after a long silence, Mark let out a breath and said, "I think I want to meet her." I turned to him, surprised. "Yeah?" He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't know what I expect from it. I don't even know what I want. But I think I need to see her. At least once." I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, but also something else, resolve. I nodded. "You don't have to do it alone." He gave me a small smile. "I know." The meeting. 2 days later, we arranged to meet Linda at the same cafe where I had first spoken to her. Mark was quiet on the drive there, staring out the window, lost in thought. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him everything would be okay, but the truth was, I didn't know if it would be. When we walked in, Linda was already there, sitting at the same table by the window. She looked nervous, twisting a napkin between her fingers. When she saw us, her breath caught. Mark hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. "Hi." Linda's eyes welled with tears. "Hi, Mark." We sat down, the tension thick between us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, finally, Linda said, "I don't even know where to start." Mark swallowed. "Neither do I." Linda let out a soft, shaky laugh. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to see you. To know that you're okay." Mark nodded. "I am. I have a good life. A good family." Linda blinked back tears. "I'm so glad." More silence. Then Mark finally asked the question I knew had been eating at him. "Why did you give me up?" Linda's face crumpled. "I was 19. I had nothing. No family support, no stable job, no way to take care of a baby. I wanted you to have a chance at a better life. And when your parents came along, I knew they could give that to you." Mark looked down at his hands. "Did you ever think about me?" Linda reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. She placed it gently on the table and slid it toward him. "Every day." Mark hesitated before opening it. Inside were dozens of old photos, letters, and even a tiny knitted baby sock. "I kept everything," Linda said, her voice breaking. "I wrote you letters. Every year on your birthday. I never sent them because I didn't want to interfere. But I always loved you, Mark." That never changed. I saw Mark's fingers tremble as he sifted through the box. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. Finally, he exhaled, closing the lid. When he looked up, his eyes were glossy with unshed tears. "I don't know what this means for us," he admitted. "I don't know where to go from here." Linda nodded. "That's okay. We can figure it out. No pressure, no expectations. Just one step at a time." Mark looked at me, and I nodded, silently telling him that whatever he decided, I was with him. Then, for the first time, Mark smiled, a small, hesitant smile. And somehow, I knew we were going to be okay. Wow, this has been an emotional journey, and I still can't believe what I just uncovered. But what would you do if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another jaw-dropping story. And hey, if you've ever experienced a shocking family secret, feel free to share. Your story might just help someone else going through the same thing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.